tell me, Dennis, were you drafted or did you join or how'd you wind up?
Well, I graduated here in Pampa in 1968 and spent the summer working on Grandpa's farm. And my parents really wanted me to go to West Texas State and try that. So I went there for one semester and lived in a dorm with Eugene Mercury Morris, if you know him.
Yeah.
He was a character.
You want to just take those off and so, yeah.
I'm going to fidget.
No, that's fine. I just didn't want to hear the keys jingle.
Yeah.
We want to hear you.
And so after one semester, I didn't like it at all. And I dropped out of college and went to see the Army recruiter and signed up, enlisted.
Okay, what year was that?
That would be January of '69 is when I enlisted.
Okay, and you were how old?
18.
Wow. 18, just a baby.
Yeah.
Huh.
Mm-hmm.
So
I'm
where'd
66 now.
Yeah. So where'd you go after enlisting?
I went to Fort Bliss for basic training. And after 8 weeks of basic training, I went to Fort Huachuca see, my dad told me when I enlisted, he told me to enlist as a mechanic, you know, where you could stay in the rear with the gear. There's a story about that I'll tell you in a minute.
Okay.
And so I enlisted as a mechanic, and they sent me to Fort Huachuca to wheeled vehicle maintenance course. And after 8 weeks of that, I went to Fort Sill, Oklahoma, to track vehicle maintenance course, TVMC, and became a track mechanic to work on tanks and APCs and anything with tracks. Then I got 30 days leave to go home before I went to Vietnam. And during that 30 days when I was home on leave, Neil Armstrong set foot on the moon. And I watched that in at Grandma's with a little black and white TV. And it occurred to me how ironic that we're stepping foot on the moon and we're still going across the world to kill people. You know, that just seemed incongruous to me. But, you know, I was raised watching combat and the Gallant Men and John Wayne all the time. And I thought it was my duty to go do my duty. And so I did. And when I got there, it was something else. So real different biscuit over there. My first night in country was the worst.
Really?
Yeah. You fly on a 707. That was the most modern airliner at the time with stewardesses and everything, you know. And we landed in Cam Bay. And they said, okay, boys, this is Cam Bay. This is the biggest American base in South Vietnam. It's the safest place we got. LBJ himself was here. I said, okay. They said, go to bed in these barracks. And you'll be safe tonight. You don't need a weapon tonight. Nothing's going to happen. So I'm on the second floor of these, we call them hooches. That's what we lived in, was hooches in base camp. And the wall only goes up halfway and then it's screened because you don't need insulation, it never gets cold. I was on the second floor of this hooch, and I'm laying there in my cot in my brand new green underwear, and I can't sleep because it's so hot and it stinks and I'm scared, and I hear what I think is thunder off in the distance. And it keeps getting louder and closer, and I figured it out. Finally, it's not thunder. It's rockets and mortars. So the first night I get to Vietnam, Charlie, the enemy, Mr. Charles, the Viet Cong, decide that they're going to attack Cam Bay. And they did. They attacked it big time. And by the time I figured it out, all these other new guys had figured it out before I did, and they ran out there and got in the bunker. We had these bunkers everywhere where you could get in there to not get shrapnel from the rockets and mortars flying around. And all these new guys, these replacements, are all in there, you know, like sardines. And there's no room for me to get in at all. I mean, the last ones are like hanging out the door. So I'm looking around, and the ammo dump's blowing up, and everything is just going sky high. And I said, my goodness, if this is the safest place they got, I'll never make it here. And so all I could do was get them. They had these sandbag walls around the hooches that were about this high. And I jumped down behind that sandbag wall and and ate dirt and gave my soul up to Jesus. And said, Jesus, just get me through this and I'll be your man. And sappers, you know what sappers are? Mm-hmm. Sappers, they strip down to a breechcloth, and that's all they're wearing, and they're carrying these canvas bags full of plastic explosive, and they run up and down the street throwing those plastic explosive charges into buildings and stuff and blowing them up. And they thought it was so safe at Cameron Bay that the sentries didn't even have ammunition for their M14s. They were carrying M14s there, which was the older main battle rifle. They didn't have M16s. But anyway, they didn't have any bullets at all, no cartridges, because they thought it was so safe. It was just for show to have that rifle. So they couldn't shoot the sappers. They couldn't do anything. They were like me. They were helpless. They blew up a hospital a little ways over, and those guys were laying in there. They couldn't jump up and run out and save themselves or get away or anything. I think they killed like 33 in that hospital. But that was the worst night. The first night was the worst night. And the next day, they flew me up to Pleiku, the Central Highlands, to the 4th Infantry Division. And I get to the 4th Infantry Division. I'm a track mechanic, and I go down to the battalion maintenance office, which is a big motor pool thing. And I'm walking up there with my duffel bag, and this buck sergeant, he's tough looking as he could be, mean looking. He was waiting for me. He knew I was coming. His name was Gibbs, Sergeant Gibbs. And he said, "Oh, you're a track mechanic, huh?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, you see that tank right there? Get on it and let's go." So for a year, I was a tanker, not a track mechanic. They didn't need any more track mechanics. They had plenty of older lifer types to do the track mechanic work in the safe area in the base camp. They needed me to be a crewman on that tank and to head on out to Indian country. So that's what we did.
Wow.
Yeah. So I got an M16 and a .45 pistol and a tank with 4 big machine guns on it. I felt a lot better the second day because I could shoot back instead of just being a sitting duck, helpless. But that's what I was telling you about. My dad said to be a mechanic. It didn't work out.
No.
It didn't happen.
No. So you're a tank.
Let me make an adjustment.
Okay.
Gonna retape.
He's gonna tape your microphone cord.
Yeah, let's go around this side. Yes.
Am I jumping around too much?
You're fine.
No, you're okay.
Because this makes people nervous to be on TV. You know that, don't you?
Yeah. Yeah.
Makes her nervous.
Makes me nervous.
We make her do it every week.
But you're a veteran. You're used to it.
You don't know. I'm not really that much of a
I'd
veteran.
rather be going up Mangang Pass right now than doing this.
Oh, really? Yikes.
You don't know what Mangang Pass is,
Uh-uh.
do you?
What is it?
In the Central Highlands, there's mountains. It's up away from the, like Saigon, where it's all lowlands and steamy, humid, no mountains, and rice paddies, you know. Well, up in the Central Highlands, they have triple canopy jungle on these mountains, no rice paddies, well, a few here and there, and it's a lot cooler and drier. And Mangang Pass is the main, well, it's on Highway 19. Highway 19 runs from Quy Nhon on the coast, Red Beach, the South China Sea, from Quy Nhon on the coast all the way to the Cambodian border. And that's where we operated. And Mangang Pass was the main pass on that highway where you get ambushed. If you went through Mangang Pass and it was uphill both directions, you were going to have contact, if you know what contact is. Mm-hmm. You're going to get shot at. You can't call an ambush because you knew it was coming. But I'd rather be going up Mangang Pass or through it right now. The other main pass was An-Khe Pass. An-Khe Pass was between Quy Nhon and An-Khe, and Mangang Pass was between An-Khe and Pleiku. Pleiku and An-Khe were our 2 biggest forts. I like to call them forts. They call them base camps, LZs, fire support bases. They were forts,
Yeah.
you know. Because Charlie, he owned all the country. All the country was Indian country. At night, you didn't want to be out there in Indian country because Charlie ruled at night. We ruled in the daytime because we had the firepower. You've heard that motto, peace through superior firepower? Well, it worked in the daytime, but at night, your barber might be Charlie. You know, the people working in the mess hall might be Charlie, and they're crawling around at night hoping you'd come out of your fort to get ambushed. And we like to stay behind the wire because all the forts had a lot of wire around them, all kinds of different wire, concertina, double apron, trip wires and everything, claymore mines, bunkers, fortifications, emplacements, machine guns. Only spent one night outside the wire, and that was a little South Vietnamese fort where my tank wouldn't go through there. See, the entries, the roads into the forts would go like this. Instead of going straight in, they would go like this. And wire was everywhere, and the tank was too big. It wouldn't go down that little path into the
Between
inside
the wire?
No, we couldn't get in. So we had to spend the night sideways outside the wire with all 4 machine guns facing out. And we were with some engineers. I was in the 4th Combat Engineers. And we were with some engineers that day, that night, and they could have got in because they had dump trucks and scoop loaders and bulldozers, and all that equipment would go through that maze, but the tank wouldn't. So they stayed out there with us, you know. And it's not good. It's not a good feeling to have Charlie on one side, and your supposed allies, the ARVNs, the Army of the Republic of Vietnam, to your back, you know, because they might just open up and get you in the crossfire, you know. That was a bad night.
That would be a bad night.
It was. But nothing happened. The other guys on my crew, they went down to the village and had a good time. I stayed with the tank behind the machine gun.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I stayed most of the time, was behind the machine gun.
Really?
Yeah.
That one?
That one. Ma Deuce.
Okay.
Browning M2, heavy barrel. The world champion for over 100 years now. Well, right at 100 years. I think it came in service in 1918.
I bet that's
It was
quite-
developed by John Moses Browning, for World War I, but it didn't get into production in time. It missed that war. John Moses Browning, you know, was the greatest firearms inventor of all time. He invented the 1911 pistol, the BAR, the Ma Deuce M2 heavy barrel Browning heavy machine gun, the 30 caliber Browning machine gun, just all kinds. The Browning A5 automatic shotgun, the first automatic shotgun. John Moses Browning, we call him Saint John Moses Browning because he's the greatest firearms inventor of all time.
So, I mean, I'm looking at that, and you're still exposed.
We didn't ride inside the tank. You never ride inside the tank. You ride on top of the tank. And on the top of the APC, the Armored Personnel Carrier. Nobody rides inside. Just ammo and equipment are inside. And there's a very good reason for that. Because if you're inside and that B-40 round goes through the side, a B-40 is a rocket-propelled grenade, RPG. I think it was RPG-7 was the B-40. And it would make a hole about this big on the outside with a little slag around the edge, like somebody took a great big cutting torch and just blew a hole in it. Well, that was just the entry. But on the inside, when it went off, there was nothing. If you were inside there, you became pink fog. We didn't want to be pink fog. We'd rather be on top where we'd maybe take a bullet, where Mama would have a body to bury, because you can't bury pink fog. You can't even gather it up. So nobody rode inside. Well, the driver had to ride inside, halfway. You know, he has most of his body as he could outside, you know. But to reach the pedals, he had to be somewhat inside the tank. But other than that, no, we rode on top. We squatted up on top behind the machine guns. We were minesweepers. We had these tanks with mine rollers mounted in front, called a combat engineer vehicle, but it's just a tank. Been modified for minesweeping. CEV, combat engineer vehicle. And that was our job, to go out every morning and sweep the highway for the mines that they'd plant all night long. And we'd run over them, blow them up, so that they didn't destroy trucks and Jeeps and stuff that were less armored that would be destroyed or kill some people, you know. And it was okay as long as you were just running over the Viet Cong homemade mines, the basket mines. We could just keep rolling. But if they had a Soviet anti-tank mine or even a Chi-Com anti-tank mine, that was not good. That would mess up your whole day. You're at least going to lose some rollers and maybe blow off a track, lose a track. It's no fun when you lose a track. It's a lot of work to put one back on. And it might either wound or kill your driver because he's right down there. He's going to be buttoned up when he's minesweeping, but still he's right there behind the minesweeper. And a Soviet anti-tank mine is really heavy duty, you know. Fortunately, they didn't have too many of those. Mostly it was just little improvised devices that we ran over and blew up.
I can't imagine what you've seen, though, in that position.
We saw a lot of things.
Yeah.
Yeah. We saw a lot of explosions, and firefights, and ambushes, dead people. Some of your straight leg armored units and cavalry units, they had tanks and APCs. They would be so mad and enraged that they would take the dead enemies and wrap them up in concertina wire and drag them around behind their tanks for a couple of days till they started stinking, and then cut them loose and nail the ace of spades to their forehead. You know what the ace of spades is? It's the death card. The Vietnamese are very superstitious about it. So the Bicycle Playing Card Company sent us cases of decks of cards, and the only card in that whole deck would be the ace of spades. There would be like 54 ace of spades in that deck. They just sent them to us for free.
Wow.
And everywhere we went, we'd be throwing them out, you know. Psychological warfare. Because I hate to tell you what they did to us. Okay, you want to know? You want to hear?
Yes.
Okay. They would kill you slowly, torture you to death, cut off your head and your genitals. And they would have your genitals sticking out of your mouth and your head on that pole. The rest of your body they would feed to the pigs. Nobody ever hears that, but that's what happened.
Did you see that?
Yeah, it was like, you're not supposed to take pictures of that stuff. And they confiscated all my pictures on the way back. I should have mailed them home instead of trying to carry them. But I never imagined that they would be confiscating my personal black and white pictures. But they did. Because they didn't want the American public to see things like that. It wouldn't be good for our "we're the good guys"
Yeah.
theme.
Yeah.
Yeah. There are no good guys in a deal like that. It's just dog eat dog. Take no prisoners. No quarter. All out war. The Geneva Convention didn't apply at all, whatsoever. We theoretically gave lip service to going by it, obeying it. We didn't. Not in the field. Because in the field, it was mostly just young guys. Because all your big shots, your officers and stuff, your higher level NCOs, they didn't come out there where we were. They stayed back in base camp where it was safe. We call them base camp commandos. There's another term, but I can't say that. We like to stay at Plagerang mostly, because that was the end of the line. It was right by the Cambodian border, and those officers were not going out there. So we stayed there because nobody messed with us out there. Mm-hmm. The colonel would forget that we existed until he needed us, and then he'd call us on the radio, "Hey, I need you to go over here and do this." Okay. But if we could, we stayed there because there was nothing there but a fort. It was a Green Beret fort. Right on the maybe 4 clicks from the Cambodian border. There was nothing there but a detachment of Green Berets and a battery of 175 millimeter howitzers. That's the biggest cannon the Army's got, or had at the time. I don't know what they have now. But it would shoot like 20 miles. and the round weighed about as much as a Volkswagen. But there was 3 of those, a Green Beret detachment, and a whole bunch of Montagnards, rough puffs, regional forces, popular forces, kind of like the militia. They were not in the Arvin Army of the Republic of Vietnam, but they were allied with us. They hated the Vietnamese. The Montagnards and the Vietnamese have been fighting for 5,000 years. The Montagnards were pretty much Stone Age, primitive people, and they looked more Polynesian, actually, than Oriental. And I think Montagnard means something like Negro in Vietnamese or something like that. Anyway, we came along, and we gave all the Montagnards an M16. So instead of their little crossbows to kill Vietnamese with, they had an M16. They loved us. They were our friends. And we abandoned them. When we left, they just got left behind and massacred, genocide. Time out.
Me too.
The North Vietnamese, when they conquered the South, they tried to pretty much exterminate the Montagnards for revenge for 5,000 years of warfare. It's a sad deal. It almost gives you the lesson that it's sometimes pretty deadly to be an ally of the United States, to be a friend of the United States, because we just pulled out and left them, holding the bag, you know. And they did the same thing with the regular Arvins. Congress cut off all their supplies, no ammunition, no bombs, no more helicopters, no more APCs. They had no chance after Congress did that. It was a foregone conclusion. I mean, when I was there, we pretty much had the war won. You know, we were winning when I left. It was pacified pretty much.
So you think you could have won?
If they would have turned us loose, because they kept us on a tight leash all the time, if they'd have turned us loose, we'd have been in Hanoi in 2 weeks. And if they let us keep going, we'd have been in Peking in 6 weeks, because we had all the overwhelming superior firepower and equipment, B-52s, everything, you know, if they would have wanted to do that, but they didn't want to do that. They just wanted it to be fought down to a Mexican standoff, I guess you'd say, like Korea is, you know, and to leave it North Vietnam, South Vietnam. Well, the North wasn't going to do that. And we had the North on the ropes really bad. General Giap, G-I-A-P, he said if we'd bombed Hanoi one more day, they were ready to capitulate, sign a peace treaty, and the war would be over. But for some reason, Nixon stopped the bombing, and they decided, well, we might as well keep on with the struggle. And they eventually won. But we were all gone by then, long gone. The last ground troops left in 73, and Saigon fell 2 years later.
How long were
75.
you there?
1 year. That's all they can make you stay, is 1 year. You can extend if you want. I could have stayed there another 3 years easy, but I didn't want to.
Right.
I was ready to come back to the world. We call this the world, the land of the big PX. You know what PX is?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was ready to come back home. Because those guys were trying to kill me, you know.
Yeah. Plain and simple.
A year was enough. I wanted to go, and I was happy to go, but I wasn't too happy that first night when I got there.
No. Did you ever feel scared like that again?
All the time. Anybody that's in combat that says they're not scared is lying. Either that or they're completely berserker, you know, because, but the thing about Americans is they might be scared, but they don't show it. They're very brave in combat. As long as Americans can keep their legs protected, that's the thing. And sometimes we'd have our legs down in the tank, but as long as your legs are protected, you're pretty much 10 foot tall and bulletproof. You think you're Superman. You're pretty much fearless, but still afraid at the same time, because you never know when a bullet's going to come out of the bush and put you in a body bag, you know. I remember one day we were going up Manging Pass, And we had an American flag on the radio whip on the aerial. And it didn't want to stay on there. It kept coming off. And I was tank commander at that time. And I took the flag down and hooked it with a safety pin around my neck, like Superman's cape. And here we're going up Mangang Pass. I'd like to have a little movie of that. You know?
Yeah.
Exchanging contact with a flag around your neck. Crazy. Americans are crazy. And there was only 4 of us on the tank. And sometimes we'd go places by ourselves. You know, 4 guys against the whole NVA battalions, you know. Because we were not that bright. We were like, we're crazy. We're bulletproof.
Well, the ones that dragged the Vietnamese
Behind the tanks?
behind their tanks. I mean, how do you explain that to people? Is it just something that kind of snaps and makes you do those sorts of things?
Well, I told you what they did to us.
Yeah. No, I know.
We didn't do as bad as they did.
Yeah.
And it was like an eye for an eye. And the grunts, you know what they would do? The infantry? Oh, let me tell you what, tankers, we were DATs, okay? D-A-T, capital D, capital A, capital D, dumbass tankers. We called grunts crunchies. You don't understand? That's the noise they make when you run over them. Infantry is crunchies to tankers. Or tread grease. That's what Patton called them.
Yeah. Goodness.
Gallows humor.
Yeah. Yeah, there is such a thing. And I guess it helps.
What were we talking about? Dragging people behind the tank?
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't all that common because, you know, even as hardened and hardcore as we were, that was still a little bit over the top, you know. And if you got caught doing that, you'd be in LBJ. You didn't want to do that anywhere close to where there were like reporters or brass, you know, lifers, brass, people in command. You didn't want to do it at all because you'd be in LBJ, Long Beach jail. You didn't want to go there.
Oh.
It was a bad place to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, did you lose people over there? Did you get shot? I mean, did you get
Fortunately, on my tank, Sergeant Gibbs, he was my first tank commander. And it was me and Sergeant Gibbs and 2 other guys. Christie, he was from Michigan, and Lorang, he was a farmer from Iowa. And that was the crew for the first little while. And then Sergeant Gibbs, he lives in North Carolina now. I'm going to have to see him someday. Because when I first met him, when he said, "You a track mechanic, get on that tank and let's go," he was like a stone cold killer. He'd been there almost a year. He didn't play around. Oh, and he told me, he said, "You know, there's a lot of dope here. And there's 4 of us on this tank. You're on this crew now. And if we catch you messing with that dope, we'll shoot you ourselves. And your mama won't know the Viet Cong didn't kill you. Because our lives are in your hands, just like yours is in our hands. And we're not going to put up with it." Incentive enough for me. But he liked to drink beer. We all did, because you could not drink the water. And usually the beer was hot because we didn't have any ice. Mama said she'd sell you a little chunk of ice about like this for 50 cents. And in 1969, Vietnam, 50 cents was like probably $50 right here, right now. But we'd take that little chunk of ice and put it down in the bottom of a jerry can. You know what a jerry can is? It's an insulated, no, it's not a canteen, it's an insulated, like ice chest, sort of, made out of steel or aluminum, with a lid with latches. And you'd stack that beer in there and latch it down because it had a rubber O-ring. And you would wait just as long as you possibly could before you'd open it back up. So maybe most of that beer would not be hot anymore. It'd be lukewarm because all that ice would be evaporated. All that little piece of ice would be evaporated. We never found a fire extinguisher over there because as soon as anybody got a fire extinguisher, they would line the beer out on the ground and spray it with a fire extinguisher to cool it off. Because we didn't care about putting out fires. There's fires everywhere all the time. I was going to say something and I forgot. Oh, Sergeant Gibbs, he rotated. And so I think Christie was next up. So he became Spec 5. He was already Spec 4. I was just PFC when I got there, but as soon as I got there, I became Spec 4, which is the same as a corporal for pay purposes. A corporal can give orders to a Spec 4, but even though they make the same pay, because Army tradition, I guess. Anyway, the colonel wanted all his tank commanders to be buck sergeants, so Christie became acting jack buck sergeant, 3 stripes, but he was actually just a Spec 5, well, just same pay. And every time somebody rotated, the next one up would get the buck sergeant. I did the same, and I became buck sergeant, acting jack. And so when it came time for me to come home to rotate, the colonel came to me and he said, "Look, you're doing a great job, and I don't really have anybody to replace you with. And if you'll just extend for 6 months, I'll give you those stripes permanent." Woohoo! I said, "I don't think so, Colonel. I'm going home." So it made him so mad. Everybody else, when they rotated, they were automatically promoted to Spec 5 from Spec 4. And he canceled my Spec 5 because it made him so mad that I wouldn't extend. I didn't care, But, if I'd known then what I know now, I would stay, but I wouldn't have extended with him. I went to Recondo school, became a real badass. Probably got killed. You know what Recondo is?
Reconnaissance.
Recondo school is where they teach you how to be alert. The real badasses.
Mm-hmm.
You know what alert is?
Yeah, we
Long range reconnaissance patrol.
Mm-hmm.
4 guys go out there snooping and pooping by themselves. So their job is to not make contact at all, just to observe, It's about the scariest thing there is over there, to be out there in the jungle, just 4 guys on the ground. Hopefully your radio keeps working.
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
in a tank, you can't sneak up on anybody. They hear you coming from 5 miles away,
Yeah.
I like being a tanker, but I don't know. It was not the same as what LERPs did, That was the real. If I could have did that, I'd have bragging rights,
You don't think you do?
Well, I do sort of, But that would have been not a wise decision to make. But I've often wondered what it would have been like to stay another year or 2 or even 3. I could have stayed 3 more years. When I got there, there was a sergeant, an E7, that had been there already 6 years. He was on his 7th tour. So he got there back when JFK was still president, But he was a base camp commando, so he had it easy.
What happened when you came home?
When I came home,
Mm-hmm.
I got on my dirt bike, and I was out there in North Crest here in town. You don't know where that is. It was a fairly new subdivision, and there was a field out there, and I was racing my little dirt bike through this mud puddle, and I hit this mud hole, and the bike stopped, and I just kept flying through the air. Broke my collarbone. So that's how I spent my 30 days home from Vietnam, was trying to take it easy on my collarbone. Then I had to go to Germany for 1.5 years because I enlisted for 3 years, and I spent the first 6 months stateside getting trained, and then a year in Vietnam. And that's just 18 months. I still had 18 months to do. So I went to Germany, the 3rd Armored Division, stayed in engineers, 23rd Combat Engineers.
Hmm.
But I didn't stay there because I was a Spec 4, and they put me on the same tank I was on in Vietnam, same kind of tank I was on in Vietnam, and they were just getting their M16s in Germany, and I'd been shooting M16 for a year. I knew how it worked. So we all went out to qualify, and I made the man, which means I qualified the best of everybody in the whole company. And so the colonel, he came to me and he said, I'm starting a rifle team and you're on it. And so I never worked as a tanker again. For the whole year and a half I was there in Germany, all I did was, I started out on the 23rd Engineer Rifle Team, went to the 3rd Armored Division Rifle Team, then to the USARU team, U.S. Army and Europe team. And then I got into an AME, Army Marksmanship Unit. And my job every day was just to shoot that M16. We trained for months for one shooting match. The CENTO match. You remember CENTO? Central Treaty Organization? It no longer exists. It's defunct. It was the United States, Great Britain, Iran, and Turkey. Back when Iran was ran by the Shah, and they were our allies, you know. Well, the Brits, they were the Queen's Own Highlanders, you know, with their kilts and their bagpipes and their big black bearskin hats, and they came marching in at the match when they arrived. They came marching in. They looked good. They sounded good with their bagpipes and their drums and everything. And we were just ragtag dog faces, you know, just barely could march. And so the Brits were picked to come in first. And the Turks and Iranians, they had national match M1 Garands, which is the rifle we won World War II with. You know, probably the most accurate of all the rifles that were in the match. And the Brits used their SLR, which is the same as the FNFAL 308 main battle rifle. And we had to use the M16 because each team had to use the rifle that their country was using at the time. So nobody had any respect for that Mattel toy M16, but we cheated. We shimmed them up, laid down the front sight, lightened the triggers as light as legal, and trained every day. And so at the end of the match, because the Turks and Iranians, I don't know what was wrong with those guys. They couldn't hit the broadside of a barn with their national match M1 Garands. They were just, I don't know, not well trained. But the Brits, they were well trained, and they thought they had it in the bag. They were picked to come in first. And we were picked to come in last, 4th out of 4. Well, we beat them. We beat them all. We came in first. Oh, the Brits couldn't stand it. They could not believe that these ragtag Americans with the Mattel plastic M16 would beat them like that, but we did. It was funny.
So if you were in Germany, what did you know about the protests going on in the U.S.?
Nothing. Not one thing. Didn't care. I did not care about anything except getting through that year and a half that I had to spend over there. And we were off duty. We hung out downtown with the Germans and the German girls and drinking the German beer. You ever had German beer?
Mm-hmm.
It's very strong.
Uh-huh.
And the Germans, they drink beer all the time. Their kids go to school in kindergarten with a thermos of beer in their lunchbox. Every town has its own brewery. They're like beer crazy.
So did you ever feel the protests when you got back? Or
No. There were no protesting around here. This is the Texas Panhandle. We didn't allow that. There is nothing like that here. I don't remember anybody ever protesting around here. I was supposed to spend 3 years in the Army, but they gave me a month early out for Christmas. So I got out, instead of in January, I got out right around Christmas. And I came home. I got home on Christmas Eve night. Flew into Amarillo in my Class A uniform in a duffel bag. And I was going to hitchhike home to Pampa, but nobody would give me a ride. And it was cold, too. And I'm standing up there on the highway, freezing to death. And finally, this guy and this woman in a pickup pulled over and said I could ride in the back. So I rode all the way from Emerald to Pampa in the back of a pickup. Hunkered down on my duffel bag, freezing to death. And I got home up here on Sierra Street. It's Christmas Eve. I'm the oldest, so the rest of the kids were still home. The other 3 kids were still at home. And I still had my key to the house. So I let myself in. Everybody's snoring, you know. So I come in and I lay down on the couch, went to sleep. And, you know, on Christmas morning, Mom gets up really early. You know, and she'd come in there about probably 5 o'clock in the morning. And there's some guy laying on her couch, you know. She like to have a heart attack.
Had you changed that much? Or did
No,
she
no, no. She recognized me pretty quick.
Okay.
Yeah, she knew it was pretty quick. But still, you come out of your bedroom and walk down the hall and turn into the living room, and there's some guy laying on your couch that wasn't there when you went to bed. You know, freaked her out.
Have you seen the Vietnam Memorial Wall in D.C.?
I can't go to D.C.
Can't go to D.C.?
No,
Why is that?
can't take Betsy,
Which is?
my pistol.
Okay.
I do not go anywhere that Betsy's not welcome. Well, I can because I'm a retired deputy sheriff, and I can take it anywhere. In the United States, it's a federal law now. It took us like 25 years. The Law Enforcement Alliance of America took us 25 years to get that federal law passed to where New York City and Chicago and Hawaii and Washington, D.C. can't tell us that we can't bring our guns with us, because even retired cops are still cops, 24/7. Once you become a cop and you become into that lifestyle of being a cop, you never quit being a cop. And part of being a cop is you leave the house, your pistol's on you. That's just how it is, because it's an emergency threat management tool is what it is. You don't know when you're going to need it, and it's better to need it. Better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it. So I don't like the politics in D.C. I don't want to go there. Plus you have to fly. I don't fly. I do not fly.
Okay.
The last time I flew, my sister sent me a plane ticket on Southwest Airlines in 1987 because they were having a big Vietnam reunion in March, and they had the traveling wall there. So she sent me a plane ticket and said, "You need to come to this." So I had a free ticket, and she wanted me to, so I did. That's the last time I flew, 1987. Because you know what everybody that's been killed in a plane crash was thinking right before they got killed in that plane crash? Every person. I wish I hadn't got on this plane. If you don't get on a plane, you're not going to get killed in a plane crash, are you?
So what did you think of the traveling wall when you saw it?
I was moved, really. Can we take a time out?
Mm-hmm.
I think my girlfriend is becoming vexed. We're supposed to go to Stinnett and get a couple of piglet,
Oh.
pygmy pigs, you know what I'm talking about? Pet pigs.
Uh-huh.
And she's all excited. And it's not even time to go yet. The guy not even going to be home till 6. If we leave at 5, it'll be plenty good, but she's antsy. She sent me 4 texts. Oh, the last one says, "Never mind." Okay. I'm good. Where were we?
About the wall. What your impression of it when you saw the traveling one?
There's several of them,
Mm-hmm.
There's
We're going to have one here in
there's like-
December.
There's like half a dozen. You mean in Amarillo?
Yeah.
That was the first time I saw it, was down there in Houston. And I wasn't too impressed then, but the one that came here, I was real impressed with that operation. It was really nice, really good. And that's been like almost maybe 8 years ago now.
Did you look for anybody in particular?
No. Because I was going to tell you a while ago, Gibbs didn't get killed and he rotated. Christie didn't get killed, he rotated. Lorraine didn't get killed, he rotated. And Wilsey, he was the guy behind me, the 4th one after Sergeant Gibbs left. And that was our crew. Christie, Lorraine, me, and Wilsey for months and months. The crew stayed the same. None of us ever got killed or even wounded. Well, we got a few little nicks and stuff. I got blowed off the tank once, but no big deal. We could have all got a Purple Heart just from technicalities, but I couldn't see it, and we didn't bother with it. But I did see a lot of people get killed, but they were nameless people, They were not my friends or close buddies.
Yeah.
Because the tank crew, it's 4 guys, and you're like really tight. If one of us would have got killed, I'd still be a lot bothered about it. But I'm a lot bothered about a lot of things and a lot of what I saw and those guys that got killed. But there's a difference between your buddy getting shot off the tank and killed and you seeing rubber bags and you know what's in them, but you're not attached to them. Or you can emotionally detach yourself from all that. You know, when I got home, after I got completely out of the Army and I got home, and I went out and got a job and everything and lived a normal life, I did not have a conscious thought about the war for 10 years, probably 10 years before, and I don't remember any subconscious thoughts about it. It was just like I suppressed it. I guess that's my way of dealing with the PTSD and stuff, is I just didn't think about it. I didn't have nightmares about it or anything. And nobody talked about it. It was just like, and then when I started thinking about it again, because I was a bad alcoholic, well, I never drank before I got off work, but as soon as I got off work, I was drinking until I went to sleep at night. From the time I got off work until I laid down and went to sleep, I was drinking. And that's how I dealt with it too, was but not thinking about it and drinking all the time. And my, which one was it? My second wife, who I met on a bar stool, she was sitting on a bar stool, got me to quit drinking. And that's, I guess, when I started thinking about it more, quite a bit more. Early in the 1980s, very early in the 1980s, Danny Martin, you talk to him, he's our commander of the VFW here. We were not welcome at the VFW. You know, they didn't want us because we were like, on TV, all your Vietnam veterans were crazy, you know, psychopaths. They had to call SWAT on them, you know. It was like stereotype, Hollywood stereotype. So the World War II guys that ran the VFW, they didn't want us. So we started our own. It's called the Top of Texas Vietnam Veterans Organization. And it didn't last long, but that's when we first started talking to each other about it and dealing with it. And finally, a lot of the older World War II guys, the hardcore ones, died off, and we decided we'd just take over the VFW, and we did. So now the VFW is pretty much mostly Vietnam veterans. We run it.
Yeah.
There's very few, very, very few World War II guys left at all. I think we lost our last one a couple of years ago in this post. My dad's still alive, but he lives down in Clarendon. He's 91. MacArthur helped him whip the Japs in World War II, you know.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, MacArthur needed his help.
Yeah.
I mean, he needed MacArthur's help. I don't forget how he says it, maybe.
Well, I appreciate you talking to us about
You
all
bet.
this.
You're
Thank
welcome. You're welcome.
Thank you for your time.
Mhm.
Thank you for your service.
You bet. I was proud to do it. I'd do it again. You didn't even ask about Agent Orange.
Oh, well, tell me about Agent Orange before
It's
we
killing
stop.
us. It's killing us. It killed our junior vice commander last week. He's only 64.
Do you have experience with Agent Orange?
Oh, yeah, it was
before?
everywhere. There's no escape from it. It was everywhere. Everywhere. We were in the combat engineers. Well, Americans, we like to take a shower every day. That's what Americans like to do. Other places, I don't know how often they take a shower in France, maybe once a year, I don't know. but it's not common anywhere else but in America. So in Vietnam, the combat engineers, everywhere we went, as soon as we had built a place, we'd make a shower. And to make a shower, you put these 55-gallon drums up on a platform with a diesel burner to heat the water, pipe it and everything, and you could take a shower, a hot shower. Well, you couldn't use oil drums, you know, so we used Agent Orange drums. Empty Agent Orange drums because they were clean, or they looked clean. It was everywhere. It was everywhere in the water. We didn't drink the water mostly anyway because it said potable on the little water trailers, which means drinking water, because it had to be treated. It was nasty.
Yeah.
So we mostly just drank beer. We drank beer just to hydrate, and then at night we drink whiskey and Dr. Pepper to get drunk, because we couldn't get drunk on beer anymore. We drank so much beer. That's bad when you fight a war
Yeah.
drinking beer, huh?
Yeah.
But Agent Orange doesn't bother me because I was 18 and 19 at that time, in that year I was there. And Agent Orange took away a lot of Charlie's cover. So I could have got killed when I was 18 without it. You know, it saved a lot of lives at the time. And that's all they were thinking. They weren't thinking about 40 years in the future. What it was going to do to us. It's killing us all. I mean, there's no escape from it. Once you've got it in your body, you're doomed. It's it. You know, there's no cure. Everybody keeps saying, well, I hope they can find a cure for that. There is no cure. It's not possible to have a cure. You can't, there's no way to fix it.
Yeah.
You're doomed. Like our commander, Danny Martin, he's got it really bad. It's really sad. And it killed my uncle. My uncle was my dad's baby brother. And my uncle was in Vietnam a year and a half before I was. And so he died in 1984 over here at the VA hospital. His liver was the size of a walnut. And in 84, nobody had even heard of Agent Orange, you know. Nobody talked about it. So I got to checking on it. And his official cause of death was cirrhosis of the liver. What causes cirrhosis of the liver is alcoholism. The man was a teetotaler. He never drank in his whole life. So it was Agent Orange. He was the first one I know of that died from it. But he was a lot older when he got there. What Agent Orange does to the human body is it adds 30 to 50 years to your physiological age. You can't go by your chronological age. So chronologically, I'm 66. But I'm at least 96 in Agent Orange years, which is 30 years added. 40 years, I'm 106. 50 years, I'm 116. So if I'm 116, I'm doing really, really good so far. You know, even for 96, I'm doing really good. But I won't make it to be as old as my dad. He's 91. There's no way. Because if I was 91, I'd have to be 121 in Agent Orange years. You can't do it. There's no escape, no hope. You just have to accept it. You know, if you get bitter about it and hate the government, and it'll just make it worse, and you might die sooner. You know.
You have a good attitude about it.
You have to, because there's nothing you can do about it. It's like a fait accompli.
Well, thank you for talking to us.
Oh, you're welcome.
Appreciate it very much.
You bet.